Hi, this is Sean Clark with Horror's Hallowed Grounds, and I'm sitting here today with producer Scott Kroof and actor Alex Winter. How you doing today, gentlemen?
Good. Very good.
Excellent.
Yeah, hey, he said it. He said the word.
Had to do it.
I had shock therapy until I got that word out of my vocabulary.
So let's start from the beginning. Scott, how did this project come to you?
Well, I was just starting to work at Interscope, and the first script they gave me to decide whether I was an appropriate person to work there was Bill and Ted. We set it up at Warner Brothers, did a little development there that went pretty well until Back to the Future came out, and a major thing had to change, which was Bill and Ted used to drive around in a big van, and we couldn't do that. So Steve Herrick, who was on as our director, came up with the idea of the phone booth. We did that. We got actually it worked great and created actually more comedy in many ways, more ridiculous comedy of fitting people in a phone booth.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott.
Huh?
We'll get into that later.
Yeah, no.
Well, that was like
it was
on a practical level for the actors.
It created incredible bonding for the actors.
Yeah.
They're very very close.
Nasal bonding.
Yeah, deep bonding. Anyways, so we turned in that script. It was really great, we thought. And then Warner Brothers said, no, they didn't want to do it. So I jumped on my bicycle and went all over the place to try to find someplace. And strangely enough, we set it up at Dino De Laurentiis' company, which was called DEG, and it was supported by Raffaella De Laurentiis, who was Dino's daughter, and a guy named Alan Rich. They loved it. Dino really didn't get it, but he trusted them implicitly, and away we went.
Was there ever any resistance to the phone booth concept because of Doctor Who and the TARDIS or anything?
You know, people weren't that with it then, so we knew...
Doctor Who hadn't had its resurgence. There's all of that kind of talk of the bridging of those two cultures really came about once you had the reboot, the Who reboot recently, that Steven did. And until then, no one honestly ever in my lifetime ever, and I've worked in London for 20 years after Bill and Ted, ever once mentioned that combination to me. It was really only once the reboot happened and it became part of the zeitgeist again that everyone was like, oh, wait a minute. They have a booth and you guys have a booth. What's up with that?
Subconscious. I think Steve's whole inspiration for it was college students cramming themselves into a phone booth.
Yeah.
He was a University of Texas guy. I think he probably did a little bit of it. He might have been the jammer guy
to
push people in. But I think, it's kind of serendipity because it kind of works the zeitgeist of both movies kind of have a nice simpatico.
I agree. I've always liked it because, and I grew up in the UK, so I was well versed in Who. And in fact, I was close with the guy who was the original BBC production designer for Doctor Who originally. And we had satirized the booth, it maybe even inadvertently, probably in a way, because the whole thing with Who is that you go inside this booth and it's vast. And for us, it's clowns in a Volkswagen.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
exactly.
absolutely the gag. The gag is that we're going to pack 20 flippin' people into this thing. And in the reality of it, we shot most of this movie in Phoenix, which is blazingly hot. And in an era where visual effects weren't that sophisticated, so the booth was like on a very shaky, trembling hydraulic rig. It was like seeing Kiss in concert back in the day when they would go up in the air, but you were sure one of them was going to die.
Yeah.
And
I think that hydraulic rig was called Bob.
It was terrifying.
I think we had it on like rubber tires. And
it was super
shook
terrifying. Yeah. And there would be like in any of the scenes where we're supposed to be going around, like the old West Town, there would be like however many of us there were in a booth in like 120-degree weather in heavy historical costumery, smelling and sweating and bonding, as you said.
It was beautiful.
Eloquently.
And then we would just lift it with a little crane because we didn't have any fancy ins and outs for the visual
effects. Kind of like the Wall of Death ride at a carnival for the actors. So this was actually, the exterior stuff was day one, wasn't it, Scott?
It was day one.
Scottsdale, Coronado High School.
Yep. And it was...
Please don't look at me when you ask questions like that.
It was very...
I don't even remember 1989 at all.
All I remember about day one, other than thinking, wow, that wardrobe really looks great. I thought that was really cool. I was very happy with that. And then I was totally obsessed with who was going to play Rufus.
Yeah.
We had no one.
We could show up the entire 2-hour commentary just with the search for Rufus stories.
We had like all sorts of crazy ideas. The studio, of course, had ideas of kind of more popular people at the moment. The one that I remember vividly was Charlie Sheen, who
Sean Connery.
Well, it started off really grandiose.
Yeah.
And then, and Charlie was pretty much out of our reach too at that point.
In a very different movie with Charlie.
It would have been different. And
I would have been on a different life path had it been Charlie.
Yeah. I ended up going in Phoenix to a Phoenix Sun basketball game to see Charlie. And as it turns out, he was with my brother.
Oh, really? Spooky.
You would have thought that would have been an in, and Charlie actually was really nice and all of that. He just couldn't do it. Didn't have the right hole in his schedule, so on and so forth. And then finally, and this was weeks and weeks into the shoot, I pitched George Carlin, who I had just worked with on Outrageous Fortune and was awesome in the movie. And everyone thought, wow, that's really a good idea. So it was the one good idea I had. And, it was the second time I had that good idea because on Outrageous Fortune, I pitched George Carlin because I saw him do some stand-up at a benefit concert. And everyone thought I was a genius, so I thought I'd go for it again.
Yeah, well, George, I talked to him about this a lot on set. He was very modest as an actor. He didn't consider himself on the same level of the other actors, which was very sweet. I mean, Keanu and I were young. We were well old enough to be very respectful. We were completely, starstruck by his presence and very enamored by him and huge fans of his. And but he always had this extremely modest, humble attitude towards being in the movies. And, it's one of those movies are such happy accidents. And I'd say Bill and Ted in general is a great example of a happy accident. It barely got made. It barely got released. Weird things happened. Like we had horrible ideas for Rufus, and Keanu and I were actually really worried. We didn't find out until well into shooting who it was going to be. We thought it was going to be a disaster. And it ended up being incredibly fortuitous who we got. And the film ended up getting released by the skin of its teeth and doing incredibly well. And it just felt like everything along the journey on this film. I'd just done Lost Boys the summer before where it was the opposite. It was like all this money had been thrown at it. It was expected to do really well. The studio had just given it a free pass. We opened up the summer for it. And this was completely the opposite in every conceivable way from beginning to end. And yet has survived the zeitgeist, which is, I don't think any of us really know why. Here's Hal Landon, who I love to death, playing Keanu's dad. We had, and again, even all the ancillary cast is phenomenal. Roy Ford Smith, who worked with Python, was our production designer. Tim Surstadt, who went on to do amazing things as our DP. It was just a really great group of people, most of us very young and just kind of going by the seat of our pants.
We were very bonded because we all lived in this apartment complex.
Yeah, in Tempe, Arizona.
Did you guys live above me?
I think I lived above you because I lived on the second floor. Keanu lived on the first, but he was always in my apartment.
There was constant band
and we
rehearsal.
both played bass, and we both played bass badly. So we would just finish shooting and go back to my place and jam two basses. It was actually more inane than Bill and Ted. Like if you could imagine anything worse than Wild Stallions, it's me and Keanu actually playing in reality, and we both play bass, so it's Spinal Tap to the max. And yes, we were above you. Playing bass
until like a white noise generator, with a kind of a little more richness. It was pretty great, though. It was kind of had this camp feeling, like we were all in it. We'd go out and play basketball. We'd do all these crazy things. And
Steve was super. Was he 26, 27? Our director, Steve Herrick was super young. I mean, everybody was really young, and the writer, Chris and Ed were super young, and. We didn't expect this movie. Keanu and I really didn't expect much of this movie, not in a derogatory way. We didn't have feelings that it was going to be huge or anything. But we had such a great time making it. It really was like play every day. I mean, Steve Herrick and I would talk about it when we were shooting. It it was just like being a kid in a playground. I mean, every day the way you would do scenes was just to sort of play until you found something fun out of it. And that was really not common. It's common when you're in acting class. It's not common when you're actually working.
Yeah, he was really loose. He came from a editorial background, and his whole thing was he wanted to get as much spontaneous kind of puppy factor out of you guys. And it was like the one thing that we had thought was the most important thing with the movie, since we had no money, was the chemistry between Bill and Ted had to be unbelievable. And it had to be like two guys who had one head, in essence, that they were so locked in together. And the way it worked with Alex and Keanu when we auditioned was every time we would read together, they would just always be sitting in the room talking to each other. And then they'd go out and have lunch together. Then they'd come back in. And it was just self-evident that they had the right chemistry to kind of make the whole thing come to life.
Yeah, it's the funny thing is you either I've been in this business since I was 10 years old, and you either when you're on long projects, because I did theater for most of my childhood, where it was, I did King and I for a year, Peter Pan for almost 3 years, and you end up either really disliking the people you're working with because you're just too close together. It's like a family, or you become really close. And in Keanu, in my case, we had just become really close in the audition process, and the audition process was extremely protracted. It just went on and on.
We were really evil. We took like I don't know, I can't remember, 10, 12 best guys, and then did mix and match. Yeah. And it worked because the chemistry worked, and the heart and soul of the movie is so much that feeling. And then it kind of infected everyone. I'm looking here at Amy, who...
Yeah, she's so great.
She's kind of not the most va-va-va-voom.
But that's what's great about the casting, I think. She's like a real human being. She's not like the chick from Weird Science. It's not a cliche.
And she's just so funny.
Yeah.
Is that everyone kind of got into it and kind of found the heart of it. I think a lot of the thing that is so charming is that unlike a lot of movies about teenagers, doesn't have very much cynical stuff.
That's the thing is I love the fact that our obsession isn't the sort of standard sort of cliche feminine ideal from the 80s, and we're just not we're not mature people. We're kind of like kids, and also we're sort of more drawn to just other people. That's what made the concept work and running around and getting all these guys. I remember this night really well.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly because it went on forever.
It went on forever, and we were shooting visual effects and split screens and all of that. And we were basically doing everything in the most kind of low-tech way that we could, just because the resources weren't there. There's a really nice milk cloud tank shot. Excellent wind machines. Look at the hair. And honestly, one of the keys, if Keanu was here, he would say the hair was critical.
Yeah, Ted hair.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time waiting for Ted hair to get right. I remember he had like a hand mirror that he always had with him when we were doing shots, and he would just work until the Ted hair got right. I never dealt with that again until I worked with Randy Quaid on Freaked, who was like that with his shoes. Like, he almost quit because he couldn't find the right shoes to go with his wardrobe that made him feel like he was in character.
Right.
And when he finally found these weird, like, Salvation Army golf shoes, and then he was locked and loaded, and he killed the character. And for Keanu, it was the same with his hair.
Yeah, it was just the whole thing of just looking at George, too. He's just also Jill O'Hannison, big shout out for the wardrobe.
Yeah,
somehow
awesome.
Managed to take the 80s and move them into the 90s.
Yeah, it was great. It's great. I mean, I always felt like with what I was always looking for with Bill was in both movies was something like a clown suit that was grounded but still felt a little bit like a clown suit, something that was that you could just breathe in and wear loosely. And she was really great.
No, and the way you just see in this shot where the two of them, different ways that are just so natural, coat around the waist, shirts around the waist,
Yeah, the half
Unbelievable.
shirt, which I still get guff for.
I know. Well, you were way ahead of the whole ab thing. Way ahead.
Joel Schumacher had done that to me on Lost Boys, and I think I was still like I had some PTSD left over from my wardrobe in Lost Boys that kind of blended into Bill and Ted. But thankfully, I got rid of the fake mullet.
And the unbelievable amount of jumping bean energy.
Yeah.
Well, this puppy thing, Steve used to always, I would walk to him, as producers often do, to try to push him along. And he says, just haven't got the puppy factor going yet. It's just the bounce is not there. I got to get in. He's always trying to get more cutting material for the cutting room.
Yeah.
Speaking of Steven,
you can see the marks. You can see our marks on the ground there. Sorry, but
Yeah.
see that? Those
Yeah.
are our.
Oh, yeah.
You can see all the marks behind us. All those
Yeah.
T marks. Those are chalk marks for our places that didn't
Yeah.
get properly wiped off before we rolled camera. The speed that we were moving at that point in the evening.
I was going to ask, speaking of Steven, how did he get involved? Because at this point, he had only directed Critters, I believe, right?
You know, we did a massive search, and my gut was that we wanted a new up and coming person. We did the kind of usual go to a couple of bigger names. Everyone thought it was too much of a kids movie. And then we saw Critters, and the sensibility in Critters, the humor and the kind of action and what he did with not very much money was very impressive. So we ended up going with Steve. And then he was great because he came up with the phone booth, and that really solved a problem. And, you know, nothing like overcoming a studio objection. You always think, okay, yes, we got it. And then Warner Brothers, who was, I have to say, you know, it was Lisa Henson and Mark Kenton. And they were very gracious because in that day, it wasn't common to let properties go. But they figured, you know, we really loved it, and they kind of secretly loved it too, and it just was not going to happen.
Well, you know, Lisa was one of the reasons I ended up going in early on the auditions, because I knew Lisa for years, and I was at Warner's doing Lost Boys when she was there, but I knew her personally, and she was a big fan of the movie Squeal of Death that Tom Stern and I made at NYU. And she had told me, she had connected me to Ed Solomon and said, you guys need to meet, and he should come in on Bill and Ted. And that was pretty early in the process.
Yeah, we had a pretty lofty group. Her creative executive was David Heyman.
Right, not too shabby.
And I remember thinking, we got perfect executives here because Lisa had in her room like a whole set of crayons, and would often just sit and doodle. And
she used to be the editor of the Harvard Lampoon.
Yeah.
These people were no slouch. That's a stock shot that Dino gave us from one of his old Napoleon.
That is from Dino De Laurentiis's. And this was, I have to give massive props to Raffaele De Laurentiis and Dino. I mean, the fact that Dino, who really, they translated the script into Italian, and he just couldn't understand what the dude thing was. Yeah. And then Raffaele told him something that wasn't, it said that it meant that you were really macho. And, you know, like you're praising someone for being very manly.
Right.
And he said, oh, great, okay. So, but she had this idea that we could go to Italy and shoot there and get an enormous amount of bang for our buck. And I jumped on it.
She was right about that. I mean, we mined the heck out of all of that stuff.
It was also, again, kind of a great, our summer camp in Arizona moves to Rome, and we had an unbelievably good time, went all over the place, and just got a huge amount of production value.
Get to that report.
The Ted hair is really good, and that what he's got going right there is what he always wanted, where it kind of went straight up in the air from side to side. That's what Ted hair was.
Right.
It was very hard to actually achieve, but when he achieved it, Keanu was always very happy with himself.
It was very hand done. You know?
He just did it with his hands.
But he had a whole team working.
Yeah,
you know.
He would get very frustrated though, and it ended up right before we shot, he would just start lifting it up in the air with his hands, so it just went completely airborne. But yeah, we did a lot of stuff in Europe. We really mined it for. I mean, it's deceptive actually how much of the stuff was done there.
What was the shoot? How long? on this one?
Scott? I don't
It
remember.
was about 42 days, I think. You know, it wasn't too long. And then we were in Italy for 10 days, which I think at the time was like about $600,000 for 10 days of shooting with a full crew and everything. So it was like, you know, only because we got the DEG, Dino De Laurentiis ride in Italy. And we had a great crew, although there are some stunt guys the stunt guys are just different, and in particularly in Italy.
Here's Terry Camilleri in all his glory.
Oh, God, Terry.
He was absolutely awesome. Terry was with us, I guess, more just due to the way the script works than any of the other figures. We all became very close, and the three of us would bicker. We just kind of got method with it. I think Keanu and Terry and I would just bicker constantly with each other over every shot and every scene, and we loved each other, but we were always bickering.
Terry was just so hilarious.
He's
too.
awesome. Yeah,
The
he's really
whole
great.
concept of ditching Napoleon with your little brother is just such kind of a great, powerful concept, and generated so much comedy.
Yeah.
Air guitar and Hal Landon too.
Yeah, Hal's
I wanna
great.
speak with you, son.
He's really great. We were blessed with really, really great cast. I ended up working with
All right, sit down.
Socrates again.
Tony?
Yeah, I
Tony
worked with
Stedman.
Tony Stedman. And
I used to see him
London.
walking in my neighborhood because
Oh, really?
well, he was every time he came to town, he would stay at the house of his agent,
Oh, I
Joan
see.
Scott, who
Yeah.
lived in my neighborhood, and he was just the nicest guy.
Lovely.
He
I
had the
cast him in a Weetabix commercial I shot in London years later.
He had the best time. Actually, I think all of the older character actors had the best time because they were able to kind of clown around and just feel free.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into that with Bogus Journey, but I think the only standout there was poor Joss Ackland in Bogus, but we'll get into that later. I forgot he's got an NRA. He's got an NRA jacket on.
Yeah, yeah.
Completely forgot.
Did you guys ever try to obtain any music from Van Halen? Since there's so many Van Halen references, T-shirts, it's talked about.
We couldn't afford it. We had a great music supervisor, a guy named David Kirschenbaum, and he was a record producer, and we had to, it was, at first we couldn't get any music. So he basically found bands and had them write original songs for us. And then when DG went out of business and went bankrupt, and the movie literally almost got just sent straight to cable TV, we moved to Nelson. And when Nelson, and then the DG people, the people who were shutting DG down, had never tested the movie and just looked at it in the screening room and concluded that it would never do any business. So they didn't test it. So when Nelson did it, and that was cooked up by a guy named Rick Finkelstein, who was the lawyer at Nelson and then worked at DEG as well. We ended up moving it, and then we tested it, and suddenly we knew it tested really well, and we were able to show the movie, David, to a lot of different people. And that's how we got people like the Nelson Twins and all sorts of kind of cool bands. But we still didn't have enough money to pay for big, like, Van Halen songs and whatnot.
Where was this scene shot?
This is my favorite. I got to say that, being a young movie fanatic, starting at like age 5, I had always dreamed of being in a Western scene in a Western town. And this was so much fun. This is the Old West set outside of Phoenix.
And Carefree, Arizona.
Yeah, and it's really great, and they've shot a lot of stuff there, and this was really, a wish fulfillment. I think for both Keanu and myself, like as just for actors, a lot of this movie was literally, the insouciance was real. We were like two young guys just sort of moving through this adventure.
And this was like Roy Forge Smith, who was the production designer from Time Bandits. He just knew how to dress everything and put the right amount of dirt on everything.
And make it rich. And
Yeah.
This was a really fun. This entire sequence was great. Dan was great. Again, I love the casting. It's just not exactly what you would have expected.
Yeah, and Dan was, I remember with Stanley Stokes and Steve, we based casting him off of being in a movie, Wise Blood, I believe he was
He's in Tron as well.
Yeah, and he's just this kind of great character-y actor, not an obvious comedian, but with a great sense of kind of deadpan humor and a great face. I love that shot.
He's definitely a bit of a chameleon. I mean, it took me years to realize that was Ram from Tron.
Yeah.
That was Billy the Kid.
Yeah. Well, the thing about this movie, in terms of the casting that I love, is that each one of the historical figures had, just like us, has a kind of childlike quality. You know, Napoleon does, Abraham Lincoln does, Socrates does, he does. They're all kind of kid-like in their expressiveness in terms of who they cast. And so it helps the film, I think, in that way. The whole film has a kind of a sweetness to it because of that. It was cast really well.
Well, and they also, because they, again, back to the phone booth, because they were jammed together and treated like a group, they kind of got a really good rapport going. Look at these extras.
They're great. Everyone's great in this scene, I think.
Yeah, the dirt factor, again, I can't emphasize. Billy the Kid is the only person who's clean. And Steve Herrick, who is, from Texas, and the idea of shooting a Western scene like this was a big thrill. Now, that guy who punched out and just went through the window is Dan Bradley.
Right.
Who is an unbelievably top stuntman, second unit director, Bourne Identity guy. This was one of his early ones, and he really was great because...
Isn't that Dan with the mustache on the right, or am I wrong?
There he is in the back.
No, there he is. Right.
He was just thrown out of the window, you'll notice, too.
That's right. Yeah.
And a fun fact, he played Jason Voorhees for part of Friday the 13th, Part 6.
Oh, really?
Yes, he did.
Well done, Sean.
This is a very memorable scene for me because I had to do Splinter Unit on this, and I got to supervise that shot, which I thought was maybe the greatest shot in the whole show because I had dance hall girls, Bill and Ted going through walls, the first Melvining, that shot also, all the little pickups because we had no second unit.
Am I right in thinking it was this day when we found out that Carlin was Rufus? This is the day that I remember. I remember being hanging around here when you and Michael Murphy came and told us that it was going to be Carlin. We were well into shooting the movie, and it was just like, oh, thank God.
And we were also starting to really, it kind of was coming together. This was, when we looked at this, we kind of thought, wow, this really has production value, even though the visual effects are not crazy. The actual, that and that Napoleon shot from the...
Well, Steve is really good at staging shots. You could see that in Critters. I mean, he was always really good at choreographing scene sequences. This is Rome. We shot this in the Piazza di Venezia, right?
No, this is the Victor Emmanuel Monument, which is literally in the center of a big roundabout.
Yeah, it's like shooting in Times Square, basically.
Yeah, it's like it's a Mussolini monument.
Right.
We were just like up on the stairs, traffic below.
We had to loop, it's when you replace your dialogue. We had to loop this entire scene. It was just like shooting in the center of a traffic jam, as I recall.
It was horrendous traffic.
Yeah. But a beautiful location.
The other thing is that the thing that is really great, and when I first read the script, it was the thing that struck me was what Chris and Ed did with the language and how they broke it up and created mispronunciations and crazy stuff like that. It really kind of gives it its own original flavor.
Yeah, those guys are amazing with the way they write dialogue. Their dialogue is so much fun to perform and try to wrap your mouth around.
No, look at Tony's incredible
craziness. Yeah, Tony is really great.
I'm Bill.
But again, it's like he's, you could have cast Socrates as somebody far more. I mean, he's like a big baby the way he plays it, and it's
He
great.
does. He gets sillier and sillier.
He does, yeah. I remember his trepidation around the ice skating rink sequence.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that, his expressiveness.
All we are is dust.
His hair is working pretty good right there.
Pretty
Yeah.
good. It's not up as high as
You
would
know
like
what?
It. See how flat it is on the side of his
part
head?
of it is-
He would have been really bummed about that.
It was a humidity situation too. It's like he needed
Foreign
the
land.
dryness of Arizona to really make it.
Dude.
So who has that sweatshirt still?
I had it for a while, and it's just, I think it deteriorated. There's a few of them, obviously, because you have stunt versions.
Should be in the Smithsonian.
Yeah, I know. It's not like my Lost Boys jacket, which does travel around and show up on eBay from time to time. I think there's nothing left of any of that stuff. A friend of mine who came to visit set, who Keanu knows, still has the bumper sticker on his pants.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
He's got the
Save the whales.
or the smiley face patch. I can't remember, one of the two. But
Again,
we were
right-
pretty sweaty. Most of the stuff deteriorated. And
Yeah.
this is outside of Rome as well, right?
Yeah, I believe this is the castle where Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes got married. The Braccaccio Castle or something like that.
I have a funny story about this. I shot 2 movies in Italy back to back on this sojourn, and the second one I did was called Haunted Summer, and it was about Lord Byron and Shelley and having the summer on Lake Como when Mary Shelley conceived of Frankenstein. And in that movie, I played Lord Byron's opium-addicted lover. And literally 2 weeks after we're shooting this scene, I'm back in the same castle in this, Pascucci costumery, and there's still all the old signage from Bill and Ted there, and a couple of like the same people. They're like looking at me like, what on God? I mean, it could not have been more different, the world that we were inhabiting, this type of scenes that we were shooting, but in the same exact set.
There's also constant upstaging attempts going on with the historic figures.
But that was great, though. They're always working their way into scenes, and yeah.
Just filling up the frame, which was
Yeah.
very much of a Tim and Steve thing of having as much kind of comedy in the frame as possible, making it rich.
Yeah, and mining the historical figures' journey, so you got the sense that they were having their own sort of arc.
How we gonna meet?
Yeah.
But, but Tony legitimately doesn't know how to throw a Nerf ball.
Those are classic Italian extras moving through.
Yeah, right. This is a really good example of the budget constraints. Like normally you would have these sort of polycarbonate, super light armor that we would be in, but we were actually in regular armor that weighed like 800 pounds. It was
and
sweating
was really kind of uncomfortable in several ways that
Yeah.
Alex you might want to describe. But the fact that they were doing
Oh,
it
God, I
in
forgot
real
about that.
armor
Yeah.
made it hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time you walked, each piece would gouge you in various parts of your body, which being male were not the most pleasurable.
I love the Yosemite Sam thing you get going here.
Yeah. Yeah, we were having fun.
And the sound effects.
Yeah, the Star Wars silliness. We was just all ad-libbed a bunch of goofiness here.
The Star Wars references are still current.
Yes, I know. Who would have thunk it? But yeah, again, it was sort of like the Wild West scene. It really was wish fulfillment for 2 young actors to be in a big castle, in real armor, having a sword fight. We were really having a great time in the historical sequences.
Also, that you can hear in the this is.
This is my favorite joke in the movie. This is my favorite joke. This in terms of Chris and Ed's genius, in my opinion, in terms of the way they work with language, if you unpack the logic of this joke of Keanu's excuse for why he didn't get killed, it makes no sense on any level, and that's exactly why it's so funny.
Right.
And Keanu's delivery of it is great. And I remember seeing this movie again recently when they screened it at a theater in L.A., maybe 5 years ago or so. But I think it was still one of the biggest laughs because it's just so absolutely nonsensical.
Is this all actually inside that castle?
Yeah.
It
No,
is,
I'm
and
in armor in a castle. This is Roy Forge Smith at work here. I
Yeah.
love the way this set's dressed. It's just beautiful.
And also just the way Steve actually cut the guy going up the stairs and actually played it like for real suspense.
Yeah.
As opposed, and this is
my audition scene. I got to pause for a second here because I did this scene. It is hard I did this scene 80 trillion times over the course of a year as we were auditioning for the part. And then you get to actually doing it, and you're like, how am I going to actually bring any life to this thing? I've like worn it out like an old sock. But you always have those 2 or 3 audition scenes that you've just worn down to a nub, and then if you get the part, you have to actually perform them with some degree of spontaneity and life. That's my best line. Actually, that's not my best line. My best line in the movie is Royal. I think is the Royal Goat looking dude. Yeah, Royal Goat looking dude. I think it actually got cut, but. Here comes Keanu's line, which I love so much, which is, I think, the best line in the movie for his.
He also threw himself. That was such a great jump.
I love his physicality.
Look at his hands.
Here it is. I want to be quiet for this one.
You're alive! Yeah! I fell out of my suit when I hit the floor!
I swear to God, it's an unfunny line that's just funny. That should not be funny. But
Well,
it
it's
is
theoretically
incredibly
unplayable.
It is,
because
exactly.
We actually thought, well, should we show him
No,
flying
you
out
can't.
of the suit? It was impossible.
Exactly. It's a sheer impossibility. And the way he says it, like, I'm just going to put myself out on a limb here. Here's Kimberly and Diane, who are so lovely. And we had all been, like, the 4 of us were just bopping around Italy together. We'd gone to the Vatican. We were just sort of bopping around Italy as tourists together the whole time we were there shooting. It was really fun. We had a lot of good times together in Rome.
Now,
Yeah.
Diane had just come off Better Off Dead, where she was playing a French girl, and she did the accent for that. Was that any connection to her getting this part?
You know, maybe a little. Again, I have to go back to old movie. I think she's in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie and played an accent in that. She was really great. They were both great in the audition. She had, there wasn't a lot of thinking about, oh, they were in this movie or that movie. It was really trying to find chemistry. Mm-hmm. And again, with them, we wanted to have kind of a chemistry and a look, and they had to really spark with Bill and Ted. And Alex and Keanu made that so easy because they just hang out with people and have a good time. And everyone got real tight, real fast, which was great.
Did you audition with any of the girls, Alex?
No. No, they were cast after we were cast. I don't think we read opposite anyone else other than other Bill and Ted.
No, only other
people.
Bill and Teds.
It was really early in the process. He's great. I love this little sequence. I love the way Steve cut it. It's so well cut. That's my favorite line.
Do you recall anybody else who were up for the roles of Bill and Ted?
I do. Of course, it was. I mean, when you're acting, even when I was acting in New York as a kid, it's always the same 20 people, right? There's just the circuit. When I was doing Broadway, it was like Sarah Jessica Parker and like some people now, some people you don't, but it was always the same people. And then when you're like a young actor, when I came into Hollywood later after college, it would be the same people: Kiefer Sutherland, Pauly Shore. Corey Feldman.
I don't think we got Kiefer, but we definitely Pauly, Corey.
Yeah. I read opposite. The kid from On Golden Pond. I can't remember his name. Who's so absolutely amazing.
Is it Will Wheaton?
No. It was a bunch of people that you would always see on auditions. I mean, it was like going to the doctor's office and seeing the same 8 people sitting in the waiting room. It was always the same people. And you became friendly because you were often mostly not getting parts, obviously, when you're auditioning. Another wish fulfillment scene. You always wanted to be in a head shopping block execution scene. This was really fun to do for us. Yeah, it was a lot of physicality. Same with Bogus. I mean, Keanu was an athlete, almost pro in hockey. I am not, but I trained as a dancer and was very physical.
You're a hoofer.
Yeah, well, it was, Scott said earlier, it was really all energy all the time on both movies. And they take a lot of work and a lot of physical work. But they're super fun to do. But you're always in motion when you're playing these guys. And the low angle John Ford camera in the dirt shot,
Yeah.
which I love. Herman Herrick, he knows his movie
Yes,
references.
he does. Here's it. Is the pig shot still in? Yeah.
Yeah, that's there.
This pig shot was really
Was
a
that
hard
Steadicam
shot.
or was it just handheld?
No, it was handheld, and we couldn't get the pig to move. So the Italian AD, who apparently had worked on a farm before, had his pig moving techniques, which ultimately worked. But it was a great, fun shot, and it's very simple staging, but it's still pretty effective.
And this is all Italy. And but a big chunk of this part of the movie is mostly Italy. Going to all the stuff getting Freud, all that stuff was done in and around Rome. We were there for a little bit, so we were Phoenix.
Yeah,
and
the only
then Rome.
ones, Joan of Arc, we did on
set,
stage,
yeah. And Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so quaint, the idea of using a telephone.
And also, Steve also always got, he and Tim got really great push-ins, kind
Yeah.
of classic Western stuff.
Yeah.
That's Dan again.
So the Circuits of Time, this is the phone booth on the hydraulic unit that I was talking about. And we shot a lot of the movie on the booth, which was literally just like soldered or welded, I should say, to a piece of hydraulic, which was not the most stable effect.
We built this.
We shot this early, didn't we?
Yeah, we shot this really early. I was extremely worried because
I got to be totally honest. I don't remember completely knowing who my character was yet. In terms of, like, how it takes a minute to get into character.
Yeah.
I was still kind of figuring Bill out physically at this point. I remember.
How did you guys cast the three most important people? We got Clarence Clemens, Fee Waybill from the Tubes, and Martha Davis from the Motels.
Yeah,
Who is Chris Matheson's mother-in-law.
Yeah, they found love on that and got married and had kids.
He met
and the
his
whole
wife
bit.
and the
Yeah.
whole thing. We wanted to have famous musicians. We tried for a bunch of people, and then we just got this feeling of let's be super eclectic. I had, when I used to worked as a lighting designer, I had seen many Tube concerts.
One of my favorite bands.
And he's really a funny guy. He used to do a lot of hilarious stuff, and Clarence Clemens is just too awesome looking and was such a great guy. I was pretty worried about this set and the costumes here, I'm going to be honest, because we didn't have a lot of cash, and Roy came up with this kind of idea that ultimately really worked well. That's all kind of car upholstery on the wall. It's not metal in any way. And what was really brilliant is Peter Chesney, who was the physical effects guy, put them on teeter-totters. They're like sitting on a little teeter-totter thing to make them float because we couldn't hang them by wires and pay for the wire erasing or any of that. So it was live, which I think made it a little more playable for you guys.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was just theatrical. The sets, because of the budget, the sets were the sets. I mean, other than the very limited blue screen stuff we did with the phone booth, it was all just practical. And with this movie, I think it certainly has a lot to do with its appeal. It just feels kind of homespun, and and grounded in a weird way, considering how far out the idea is. Bogus is completely different in that way. Bogus is grand in terms of the level of effects and the level of sets, and it has a different type of comedy. But the joke here, I think, like I said, the historical figures all play it kind of like regular childlike people. Everyone feels like they're within Bill and Ted's world. And I think it worked, whether it was intentional or not. Though I do think it's Herrick's style to some degree, a sort of grounded, very sincere style. It definitely really helped the movie to sort of have a unified tone. CGI here. It's like,
These are actual CGI shots. This was
worst.
CGI. Honestly, was not a very big thing at the time.
Here's Chris and Ed. We have to.
Okay, now this
pause
is probably the most important sequence.
These are the two erstwhile creators of Bill and Ted here.
credited as ugly and stupid waiter.
Yeah, that's
Right.
Ed on the right, and well, no, they're just
Also
switched places,
working
but-
some pretty incredible hair.
Yeah. Ed with the glasses, and Chris is the taller one.
And they're obviously doing a play on ferals here. With
They are.
the
Yeah.
pig trough.
Yeah. This is Terry's physical comedy stuff is so good.
Yeah, he's great.
This is not his peak, though. He achieves the peak at the water slide, but
Was this a set or was this actually shot at
No,
a
we
ferals?
shot in a mall.
Was
yeah,
that a ferals?
it was malls. No, it was
No.
not a Ferrell's.
No.
It was I don't think it was a Chuck E. Cheese, but it was like a Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, but wasn't it all in the Mall of America stuff or whatever that massive?
No, this was a separate. This
Oh,
was,
that was
by
right.
where the bowling alley was.
Right. I wasn't here for this stuff, obviously.
Right.
One of the rare days off that we had, where
Right.
Keanu and I would go to the desert and blast the meat puppets.
This is,
and
of
just stare
course,
at
one of the
sun
things
going
that
down.
really bugs me is that pin was colored in with felt pen, and you can notice it.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. It's one of an early film for me. One of those things that just
Bugged you?
tortured me.
I have that pin now.
Yeah.
Stephen Pearl, our third AD, he kept it.
Yeah.
And he gave it to me. That's like the one relic from this movie that I actually
Which is a
own.
great pin, and then the hand painting. Again, it's
Yeah.
kind of hand done thing.
Yeah. It works with the tone of the film, though. I mean, I know what you mean as a producer. It would drive me insane as well. But
Oh, they're just, it's weird that that's the thing that
Yeah.
I notice
Yeah.
when I watch the movie as opposed
this
to.
isn't Rome.
Yeah. I think this might have been our first day in Rome.
This is Rod, who is really lovely.
Yeah.
That is like the best of special effects cheat. Like, just look up in the sky and then follow it down, and the audience will think we actually dropped the phone booth out of the sky onto the
There's a
street.
huge amount of that kind of strategy that goes on. Like, we don't really have a great cut here.
Yeah.
Well, how about putting a loud noise on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let the actor make the effect happen.
Was ist this?
It's great.
Of me. What are you doing?
This is where our pain began when we started cramming multiples of people into. Here's Clifford, who's so
This
lovely.
this was also in Italy.
Yeah, he's just.
Oh, and look
wonderful.
at you see excellent quality extras here,
Yeah.
particularly period, and all of this, like this level of production value for the budget of this movie was crazy.
Yeah.
I believe those might have been from the War and Peace movie,
Right.
and he played him so morose.
Yeah,
so-
he's great. Clifford is really great. Super talented.
Also another good hair actor.
Yeah. Well, it was the 80s after all.
Yeah, it's pretty crucial.
Tony.
How much?
You made a lot of use of lightning strikes. On this
There are
movie.
a lot of lightning. This is actually this is a really good set
Here's
that
Jane
Roy
Weedland.
put together.
Yeah, from the Go-Go's.
Yeah, and how did she get involved with this? Because I know she,
Scott?
at this
It
point,
was-
she had done like 2 films, like small
Specifically
parts.
because we wanted musicians in
Yeah.
the movie, and she was really she was absolutely wonderful in the part.
I can only now confess 30 years later that I had in high school the most massive crush on her all through high school. I went to like 90 Go-Go shows. I just kept my mouth shut the whole time we were working
This
together.
is pretty great. The reach on this,
Yeah, he's awesome.
very angelic.
Yeah.
Beautiful lighting.
Faux
from Sirsten.
Michelangelo. Yeah. Oh, I thought that's right. The Twinkie one.
And I
comes
believe
later.
this is the Nelson Brothers song "Two Heads Are Better Than One," somewhere in the background.
Right. Yep, you're right.
An
She was a
owl.
PA. That girl.
Yeah, she was the PA.
Al-
Robin? Was it
Al
Robin?
Leon.
Yes.
I actually
Yeah.
remember her name. She was great.
She was good, and again, fantastic set dressing.
Yeah.
Good dirt.
But it's so Python-esque. I remember I was such a Python
And look,
fanatic.
that's-
I would just follow Roy around, like asking him for questions about working with Python all day.
well,
He must
and
have hated
Al
me.
is such a great
He's fantastic.
actor, great stunt guy.
Yeah.
And we gave him that ridiculous club.
Yeah.
Like Genghis Khan really has a club like that.
Yeah.
Al Leong's probably one of the sweetest guys.
He is
you'll
lovely.
Yeah,
ever
he
meet.
was great.
I've hung out with him quite a bit over the years here and there. He was so great. He's no longer with us. I guess he and Tony are the two that are
Yeah.
passed, right? Out of our gang.
Oh, you mean this gentleman, not
Yeah.
Al? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but don't
Yeah.
tell me Al's gone.
No, Al's had health issues, but he's doing
Yes.
okay. It's Robert. Is that right?
Yeah.
Robert and Tony have both passed away.
Robert Barron.
Yeah. I mean, he was really.
He was good, and he, definitely has a couple of the memorable moments.
Yeah, and a total baby face again. I mean, he just plays Lincoln like a big baby.
See, the canoe ride, though, this was the big concept.
Mortifying.
And the antenna, which is really super pathetic because it's actually just the inside of an umbrella.
Yeah, I love that, though.
And then we painted it red.
Yeah.
But it actually, again, has that right level of funk to it.
Yeah. Keanu and I were always so petrified, like genuinely petrified. Whenever you see the booth horizontal like that, know that our acting is real. We're just horrified we're about to plunge to our death. Right, you shot this in the because a lot of the mall stuff that comes up later, we closed that whole mall down for the night. I remember it was like being in a Dawn of the Dead movie, just sort of because we had this entire mall to ourselves for all night shoots. It was super weird. But, we weren't there for this stuff. Terry's great.
Right. And Fraser, who plays Deacon, is pretty funny. He's just so disgusting.
Yeah, he's good. Everybody did a really good job. Steve's really good with the cast.
Yeah.
I just saw that the thing on the board that says the cars are coming. Was that an inside joke or something? Do you know?
No.
Oh, up there on the top.
Yeah, I wonder what that referred to. It must have referred to something. We'll throw that at the forums. They'll figure it out.
Right.
Maybe the band is coming to town to play. Who knows?
Yeah, I suppose that's entirely possible. But these kinds, it's tough because Keanu and I were in every single scene of this movie pretty much, except for a couple of these.
This is a day off.
Yeah.
This was your.
We shot this.
Although it's probably.
We shot this night, I remember.
Yeah, it was a split.
Yeah, because this was the night that. Yeah, I remember this night. We went down the parking lot and the guy wiped out on his motorcycle trying to be a hot dog. We just didn't get any rest. It was really hard for us to ever have a moment off, and we were both pretty physically beaten up by the end of it. But we were happily beaten. We enjoyed ourselves, but it was.
They were super energetic.
Yeah, it was just nonstop. This was shot outside of Phoenix.
Yeah,
right?
this was in Carefree, right by where the old West Town was. Right. A great running gag.
Yeah, I love the pudding dip. I think it was more stuff with that got cut out.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of it.
There was a lot more with the cavemen that got cut out, if I remember.
Yes. Yeah.
The two major things that got cut, obviously, was the end of the movie, which we used to do in the classroom and then got turned into this giant production. And we can get to that when we get there. But we didn't mention that the beginning of the movie used to open with a dance sequence that Keanu and I did at the bus stop, which we shot. And it was this, like something out of an MTV music video. It was this extended dance sequence. We'd do an air guitar dance sequence at a bus stop.
It was like a fantasy of
but happening in real life with other
Yeah.
kids looking at us like we're crazy. But it was like, and we had a choreographer. Stevie Nicks is from Phoenix, or she lived in Phoenix. So we actually did all the choreography at Stevie Nicks' house in her dance studio in her house for weeks with. It wasn't Kenny Ortega, but it was some really big choreographer came out and did this huge thing, and then they cut the whole thing, which I think was wise. It was sort of one of the tonal errors that got excised.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of everything that felt too much like a pop movie, or too
that wasn't grounded.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds absurd given the subject matter, but it's true.
That dance sequence was filmed?
Oh yeah, we shot it. We it was choreographed and we shot it.
It's somewhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can unearth it.
It's a super challenge because DG went bankrupt, then Nelson went bankrupt. So MGM picked up the rights to all of this, but the assets are kind of cast the four corners of the earth.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's a lot of shots from it all over the internet. Like, there's a lot of promo shots of me and Keanu doing like really boisterous, like jumping in the air guitars at a bus stop. That's what that scene is. It just there's a lot of PR promo shots, but no existing footage of it that I've ever seen. And there was a whole scene with us on the bus getting kind of ridiculed by other classmates.
Yeah, I always liked that scene.
I did too.
It's one of those.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about Bill and Ted is that they're really such outsiders.
Yeah.
They're such not really what you think they are.
Yeah, they're not stoners at all. They're completely drug-free, and they're like 2 9-year-old kids that nobody else understands. They don't really fit in any cliques. This was fun to do, acting opposite ourselves, which we really got to push much farther in the second movie, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, I better remind myself again. Ted, don't forget to wind your watch. Thanks, Rufus.
Yeah, that scene played out a lot longer in the original cuts, and then it kind of got pulled tighter. That was really the only thing that happened in a big way when we previewed, is we pulled some stuff tighter.
Right.
The repeated scene didn't play as well as everyone thought it might.
This was fun.
This was super fun.
I love the way this is shot. This way and the way it's art directed. It's great.
Amy is just so
She's
funny.
Awesome. She's awesome.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Missy.
Some very 80s headphones.
Yeah, everything about it. It looks like
I'd like you to meet some of our friends.
a bad music video set.
Dave Vita.
This was a very hectic day because
You had the whole montage to do, right?
we had the whole montage, and Steve Herrick was hell-bent to get as much coverage as possible just to, be able to put the sequence together.
Yeah.
Dennis Frood.
Oh, this is when things got really smelly. Whenever we were shooting outside on the booth and everyone was in the booth, it was just
Oh, yeah.
suffocatingly stinky.
And all of those costumes are really heavy,
Yeah.
warm. You guys had the best.
We had the
costumes.
lightest costumes. Yeah, but
Well,
poor Robert
Missy
and
perhaps
Lincoln.
has the lightest costume.
Yeah, but she didn't have to go in the booth.
No.
Yeah, I remember hanging out and watching Steve shoot this sequence. We're not in most of it. That was fun.
That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really good with creating scene sequences. All of his movies have these types of components.
When I think
going on.
that was one of the things that he did that was great, is he let the actors look at Jane wearing the Billy the Kid's hat.
This is the only only sequence in the movie that I am in of any length without Keanu. Keanu wasn't feeling well that morning, and he was originally scripted in this scene, but he couldn't make it.
Buddy, get together. Remember who your buddy is. So crazy. Watch out for your robe, dude.
So this is the shopping mall I was talking about, which is very surreal, because we shot here quite a bit, and we shot here all night, and so it was bone empty, except for us.
Yeah, and it was not really a successful mall either.
Oh, really? So
Oh, no.
grimy. I
That's
don't
why
remember
we
that.
got it. And,
Right.
Well, this was the big deal, like with the ending.
Yeah, this was a complete reshoot. The ending-
We shot it, and I remember vividly sitting in the middle of this classroom and going, wow, this is just not going to work.
Right.
Because, again, it was a little like you guys at the bus stop.
Anticlimactic, too.
Anticlimactic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't kind of leveraging, like, the kind of importance and
Right.
Bernie Casey, the board of three, one of our UPM, Mike Murphy,
Yeah.
and line producer on the show, plays one of the guys.
Yeah, we shot a whole extended sequence. There's the stuff at the end that got cut is we shot going to the prom with the princesses, where we're in the sort of tuxedo shorts, which that's online, the press shots from that. That didn't end up making it in the movie. I think that got cut in screenings as being extraneous. The movie was kind of over and then kept going. And then the entire ending, a presentation of the history, was just done in our history class, the same place where we meet Bernie at the beginning. And it's just me and Keanu sitting on a desk while the
That is actually
the
the first two shots are that's the real Raging Water.
Right.
I was always curious, why didn't you use the name Raging Waters? Did they not want to be involved?
Couldn't
or-
clear it.
Same with 7-Eleven, right?
Yeah.
It was originally written as 7-Eleven.
And Circle K would
Yeah.
let us clear it.
Yeah.
I think they were
Strange Things
thinking,
Afoot at 7-Eleven was how it
you know,
originally read in the script.
They had no idea how it was going to play, so
And was it Waterloo or Waterloo?
Water Loops.
Loops. Okay.
Get it?
Yeah.
Yes. Now I do.
But this is actually a miniature golf course by the freeway. But it actually worked, and then we went back. When we moved it to Nelson, they let us go back and shoot some second unit at Raging Waters to give it a little scope. But look at that incredible period underwear he was wearing.
Yeah, kids love Terry in the sequence. They just love eat him up.
He had the best time doing this.
It's a pretty tough job having to go through water slides all day.
I know. And, this, it's interesting because the visual effects may not be so great, but like shots like this, that's actually really a cool shot.
Yeah, it was tricky. Finding the right ending was tricky in terms of the tone and the scale of it. I remember even with the second movie when we were all tinkering with the story on that, we made the same mistake with that one. I remember the ending was much too subdued, and we had the same thing. We had to go back and come up with a whole other ending.
It just had to be more theatrical,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea that it's a kind of a ludicrous idea that you do your history report in front of the entire school.
Yeah.
Yet it makes it feel cool.
Yeah. Well, it's also that idea of sort of the hero being presented in front of a crowd that doesn't really work. There's no crowd. Also, the soundtrack. Like, people love the soundtrack.
Well, we got
crazy.
David Anderle from A&M was the guy who put us on to David Kirschenbaum, and Anderle was a great A&R guy. So he really just loved the vibe of the movie.
Right.
And then once we had the movie, he was able to go and really find great artists.
But what was the involvement? Because they were both Interscope movies, right? It was only the second one an Interscope movie.
They're both Interscope
Right, but
movies,
Interscope
but there
was
was
such a
no
huge
record
music-
company.
Oh, it was pre-Tom Wally and all that stuff?
Pre-Tom Wally, pre-Jimmy Iovine, who helped
okay. I
us
actually
out
didn't
in a
realize
big
that.
way on the second one.
Right. Okay, because they were around for two. Right. Because such a huge music presence.
You a musician?
Yeah, so this was all the weird, that weird mall.
Well, here. Try this.
Very high tech. And Clifford, I remember, was really adamant about playing Beethoven deaf. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, whatever anyone was doing to him, he would not respond to them unless it was something he could do. He could either feel or see. And often on movies of lower budgets, some of your secondary cast may be just a step above an extra, and they just wouldn't know what to do with him. They're like, "Why aren't you responding to me?"
Yeah.
They weren't versed actors of his seriousness.
Did you eat any of the food at this place?
No. It was terrifying.
Hot dog on a stick? Come on.
I know, but look how batter up. Come on. So great.
Yeah.
Was that a real place?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was real. This was so, but we just went in and used them
Everyone,
all.
we just shot. It also had the skating rink in it, which was pretty excellent.
Yeah, I love this gag. It's so
This is
screaming
Rod.
lame, but
Rod really dug this one.
that's so good.
And these two girls are actually pretty great.
Yeah, it was good.
Way to go, egghead.
Yeah, Tony was off and running by now.
Yeah.
So, Sean, what is Al's martial arts background? You probably know better than I would.
Oh, gosh. I actually don't know exactly, but I mean, he has significant martial arts background. I mean, he's done every friggin' martial arts film there was in like the 70s and 80s.
And he was famous. Was it Die Hard? Was it
Lethal
Die
Weapon.
Hard. No, Die Hard was his big one, but Big Trouble in Little China.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, he's always been known as that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I think there was a documentary about him called That Guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And there's was this Scott as well? What was his name?
I remember
He was on our crew.
Jim Nelson.
Right. He was on our crew. We're always throwing.
He
crew
was
members
like,
in.
he was kind of a assistant to the line producer.
Right. Yeah.
I always liked this bit of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 80s aerobics craze, which was thankfully winding down at this point in the 80s.
There's some very, very excellent hair again.
Yeah. But again, I remember I remember being off in the desert during most of the shoot. We were so fried by now that we were just trying to get rest whenever we weren't shooting. And Scott, how much of... I remember talking to the other actors like Dan and Tony, like how much of this was their own stunts and how much of this was...
Pretty
do you
much
remember?
all of it was them,
Right.
except, that land on that wasn't Al.
Right, something like a front flip, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they wanted to do, and Dan, Dan Bradley was really into, none of this was that dangerous.
Right.
And it's always so much better if they do it, and then them having to follow Jane as she just went nuts. She was not an aerobicizer by training.
No, of course not. Yeah.
I wonder if this mall still exists.
I don't
I
know.
wonder if it does.
Oh, that's, yeah. Yeah, I think someone, I don't know, a fan sent me something about this mall. I can't remember what the story was. It might have been somewhat bleak. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole area has changed,
a little
obviously
sad.
changed so much since then.
Mom, can't you go any faster?
Now he's checking out Missy.
Landon also, I felt like did so much to push his role into a completely different direction than I remember thinking it was going to be when I read it.
Right. Well, he plays it so kind of straight-faced, grim.
The mohawk in the background for no apparent reason. Here's where the guys start introducing. This was the stuff I remember when I first read the script that made it feel really special to me. Was the guys starting to introduce all the us manipulating times.
Magical thinking.
Yeah. It was just really a really clever way of playing with time. And they do it. They bent that around in 2 as well. But the stuff in this one was really fun to play.
That fake mole always bothered me.
It did it. Yeah, the obvious piece of like rubber glue stuck, sandwiched onto his face.
Yeah.
And,
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
It really looks bad in the closing scenes on stage, like from the low angle.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
so harshly lit in
Yeah.
those sequences. But
I have to say, this is one of my favorite lines in the movie.
yeah, I get quoted this line more than any other
Yeah.
line when people come up to me on the street. Much more than excellent or be excellent or any of that. People always come up to me and go, "Sandy, Miss High School Football rule." And that was one of the scariest moments for me as an actor was when this movie came out. I remember.
Didn't those guys, were they on the bus? They were
Yeah, they were
bullying
the bullies
you.
on the bus.
bullies
Yeah,
on the bus.
Yeah, they were. It was a setup and payoff that went away. But I remember being chased down. I was seeing a movie in Westwood after this came out, being chased down the street by an entire drunken frat house of people screaming that at me.
Okay, Ted. You go and watch your dad.
When your life irrevocably changes after a film comes
I
out.
mean, Mom, please keep an eye on the
Oh,
road.
Yeah. Look, we actually colored in the thing well that time.
Whatever happened to that craze of the colored sunscreen?
Yeah. That's kind of could
Well,
come back.
Everything
Think
comes
about.
back.
I don't want to hear it, Ted. But, Ted, you go home and you pack your bags now.
Yeah, I remember really trying to as an actor, trying to wrap my head. Me and Reeves trying to wrap our heads around the logic of the time, the what you call it, the magical thinking stuff.
Yeah.
Just so we could play it. Because I remember when we first read it, it was funny, but it was super confusing. I remember because we always tried to play everything as if at least it made sense to us, and that makes no sense. So it was really we'd sit around and try to map out how we could get those lines out and give them conviction. When if you gave them more than 30 seconds of thought, they fell completely
2 days ago.
apart.
Steal your dad's keys and leave them here. Where?
Like this
How
one,
about
for
behind the
instance.
sign? That way, when we get here now, they'll be waiting for us. See? Whoa!
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
The key to
Yeah,
the
it's
cell
just-
key.
Well, that was it. Just say the lines. I mean, that's some of the comedy is in that. Just say the damn lines. Don't overthink them. Just open your mouth and say them. Everything will be okay. You'll finish the scene and you can move on.
Did you guys have much freedom to improvise on
Oh, totally. Yeah. I remember this shot really well. It drove Tim crazy because I have like blue-green eyes. I cannot handle the sun at all. And he was always sticking reflectors in my face for those dolly push-ins.
Right.
And I was so blind. My eyes were just streaming with tears and I couldn't see anything. Yeah, we would play with the lines, but more like, in terms of the play of a scene where everything's kind of going crazy, the guys are really good at writing dialogue, and the dialogue is super specific. So
and the rhythm is very specific.
it is, absolutely. So, I mean, we would come up with our own, sort of Chris and Ed-isms that we would fold in if they were good enough or if it just made sense organic to the scene. But their dialogue is really specific, and most of the time we were working off of script for the meat of it.
Hey, Dad!
I mean, for me, honestly, I feel like the success of this franchise is mostly to do with the language and how much fun it is to hear, and it's a real credit to the way those guys write together, because it's very rhythmic and it's multisyllabic and it's just fun to listen to, and a lot of it makes no sense.
Right. But also so much of what works too is the aspirational thing of devoting yourself, regardless of talent,
completely,
to doing something that just feels like something that everyone can, identify with. Very good artwork there. It looks kind of like a dragon.
So, my son has the drawing talent in the family, but
yes,
I mean, as far as me and Keanu, I think that was an early decision, and certainly very important to Steve Herrick of playing them really sincere, of it not ever having a nod and wink at the audience at all, and just keeping them sincere
and innocent, and
yeah, and that is really fun to play because it's just not it's so childlike. You don't get to do that very often.
I ask that you all work together so that we can get down to the car.
Very quiet now. Quiet.
Against the wall.
But Chris and Ed were really good friends, and they had done Bill and Ted as stand-up when they were in college.
It was an improv gag that they used to do, answering questions as Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
What else do I say?
So there's a real sincerity to the way the two writers are riffing off of each other, and then the way Keanu and I would riff off of each other, I think, helped.
Come on, Bill, put it back in.
Ted,
Always helpful to have a window in a jail.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're supposed to. There's a scene where we break it off with a hacksaw. Do you remember that,
Yes.
Scott?
We had to cut it.
Yeah,
But
there
then
was
we
a
were
get a
able
hacksaw, leave it by the windows.
to overcome it with
There's-
this excellent trash can.
Yeah,
Ted, where are you? Get this off me. Ted,
yeah.
Back at the school. This was
In conclusion,
the reshoot.
I think Abraham Lincoln
Yeah.
will be most impressed with the world of
So what was the big difference between the original ending?
Well, we were in Bernie Casey's classroom. It was tiny. There was no.
Yeah, with windows. The biggest problem in
Yeah.
a lot of ways is there was no way to do dramatic lighting in it. And we just thought, we got to go for it.
And there
then
was
we
no
went,
scope. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
we
just
got-
like our classroom. There was no other kids in the room. It wasn't packed out with kids.
Yeah, it
just
was like a normal classroom, and the realism of it just kind of undercut.
It was very low key. I mean, it was literally me and Keanu sitting on a desk as the historical figures acted stuff out. It was super, super low key. It had none of this grandiosity.
Well, and then we, although it's not explained, of course, magical thinking allowed them to light the show as.
Yeah.
And we actually got real lights from rock and roll, very lights from rock and roll shows. They're used in rock and roll shows to kind of give it that feel.
Yeah, it was like our moment of being Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel Genesis tour, circa, only without any talent or anything else.
How's it going? I'm Billy the Kid.
Is Dan wearing a wig there, or was that?
No,
No,
that's
he's got-
Dan. He's
that's
pure.
Dan's hair.
That's pure Dan.
That
Yeah.
was his hair. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'd like you all to put your hands together.
Oh, Bernie.
Bernie Casey.
He's
is-
really good.
Yeah.
Terrified me as a child.
Me
in
too.
Gargoyles.
Yeah. Just in general too, he's just such a tough character.
Theodore
Such a sweet man. It was a lot more fun for us to play this as well. I mean, it was something we weren't. The second one was a little harder to kind of fit it into the narrative because there was this whole. We'll get into it with the second movie, but with this one, it was actually hard for us as actors to do the finale the way it had been written because we were so passive. Like we were just sitting on a desk, we couldn't really move.
Right.
So it was impossible to give it any energy. And this one, we were just bouncing around on the stage, and you could give it the Bill and Ted energy.
Yeah, and kind of see Bill and Ted as performers and kind of believe that they might actually be able to become musicians.
Right. Yeah, and that they'd taken more of a part in the proceedings. It was it's hard to do that. I remember being frustrated with the other ending while we were shooting it.
It was one of those ones.
Yeah.
Did we shoot? We shot all the way through.
We shot it. Yeah.
But we also shot it on a too tight schedule too.
Right.
So when we cut it together, it was just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
That just lays there.
Yeah. It had no way for us to.
Yes, it is. He's going to Alaska.
Hal is so physical though, and he's so physical. Like he was so good at picking up Keanu's, because he does the Keanu thing.
Right,
Like
he does the theater
moves his
acting.
limbs the same way.
Well, he does it in the second movie. You see him do.
Well, he literally does it.
Ted imitation.
Yeah, but it was he's a really good physical comedian.
His expressions, he sells it so well,
Yeah.
too.
To make his son the embodiment of all of his own deepest anxieties about himself.
Yeah, I can't imagine this ending being in a classroom. It definitely would have
And it
killed it.
It wasn't the same at all.
Ted Hare.
Oh, big time Ted Hare.
Super Ted Hare.
Yeah, that's what
That was the dream. right
Keanu's
there.
dream. If every shot had looked like that, he would have been very happy, which he was not.
Also, this allowed us to pay off all the other characters who you kind of like. Amy, she was just always good for humor. To cut away to her, her reaction was great.
1269.
Please welcome the very excellent barbarian, Mr. Angus.
Very excellent barbarian.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot
this
of
is
great
Al
stuff in this.
doing his.
Shtick.
Yeah.
700 years ago, totally ravaged China. And who we are told 2 hours ago, totally ravaged Oshman Sporting Goods.
Jane's really going for it in this scene.
Yeah, I was so happy. Whenever I was working with Jane, I was happy.
Miss of Arc.
Well, she's adorable.
She's
Yeah.
awesome.
I actually went to Universal Studios with her several years ago, and we went to the Bill and Ted show.
Oh, really?
And the cast treated her like royalty.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
sweet. I haven't seen that. I heard good things about it.
Avec me, water slide.
The music of Ludwig von.
He's got a pudding cup. Oh, this, yeah.
Oh no, everyone has
Everyone has
pudding,
cups.
cups.
Yeah. Yeah, another gag that hit the cutting room floor.
Although all of them thrown away, they kind of play better.
They do. It's true. They do.
Beethoven's favorite works include Mozart's Requiem, Handel's Messiah, and Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet.
But I love that, again, just the way the guys write. Like, there's so much dialogue in this sequence. There's like pages. We had pages and pages of stuff to say, but it's so much fun to say the way they write.
I don't think it's gonna work.
Sorry. We're not laughing at us. We're laughing at the
No.
other actors.
I like that guy too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The conducting pudding cup eater.
Love San Dimas.
You know, with San Dimas, neither Keanu and I had ever been there, ever. And it was about a good 10 years later, if not longer, I was there, and with like a couple of young kids who I was friends with or whatever. And I didn't know what I was doing. I went to Raging Waters, and I was like at the top of a water slide, and the place went absolutely nuts. And it only occurred to me, I was like, what? Why am I doing this? Why did I show up at Raging Waters? And it had never occurred to me because I'd never really put two and two together. I'd never been to San Dimas in my life. It must have been more recent after the first one came out. I don't remember, but.
So was this pretty much scripted the same as the classroom? Like the
No,
dialogue?
not at
No,
all.
it was
Not at
totally
all.
rewritten.
Not completely. There was the classroom scene was about Reeves and I didn't do very much. We sat on our desk, and the historical figures acted out stuff for the class, as I recall,
Right.
for the most
And
part.
this was it was a big change because you were very much the MCs in
Right.
this version,
Yeah.
whereas the other one was more passive. So
Yeah,
it just didn't.
we basically presented our lesson via the historical figures. We're like, here's our lesson, and they just kind of did it basically. And then we went to the prom with the princesses. And there's some I don't even remember the scene in the prom. I think
Yeah.
it's in the original draft, but I can't remember what happens at the prom.
There's that damn mole.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of silly putty stuff.
Now Kevin Yeager did the effects.
He did the Neanderthals.
He did the Neanderthals.
Neanderthals.
Yeah, and he did Granny Preston in Bill and Ted too.
And
He's amazing.
Station.
Yeah.
Kevin Yeager's a master.
He's a master. Yeah. He really is.
Responsible for Chucky,
Yeah.
Oh, so much great work. I mean,
Crypt Keeper.
one of the great,
Yeah.
him, Bill Corso, Steve Johnson. They were the gods. Well, they still are. But
Yeah.
And you worked with most of them on Freak.
I
as
did.
well.
Yeah. But Kevin and we had a really good time on Bogus Journey with doing the Granny.
Do you happen to know who has the phone booth? Does anybody have it?
Yeah, it got auctioned
The
off.
miniature phone booth Pete Hewitt has.
But the big one got auctioned off as some Nintendo
I think so.
giveaway. I remember. That's
Really?
a piece of trivia.
Pete has an excellent.
I think
we
it was
had
the
a
Bill
really
and Ted
good miniature.
Nintendo game gave it away as part of their sweeps.
Was there only one?
No, there were a couple.
No, there was. Yeah, they were the horizontal ones.
And then there was and the one we had to ship to
we
Italy.
shot this early on too, didn't we, Scott? The garage scene.
Yeah.
Because Keanu didn't have Ted hair yet. Like he didn't figure the Ted hair out until further into the shoot. I remember he suddenly got this wave of inspiration.
We traveled through time. I mean, we met lots of great leaders. We got
So how did your life change once this came out, Alex? I
Well,
mean,
the frat story is a pretty good one. I mean, there were certain places I just couldn't go. I couldn't go to San Dimas anymore. I couldn't go into a Circle K. I couldn't walk past a frat house. I remember being in Paris a couple years after Bogus, and like a bunch of skate kids like totally freaked out. I started getting hate mail from English teachers who said that we'd ruined the English language, and I started getting love letters from history teachers.
History
who
teachers
said we had given their
loved
kids
this.
the desire to go into history. I mean, it changed completely in many ways, and then not in others. But every day from when this movie came out, I get recognized every single day. I just got used to it, but that never goes away. You just get used
This
to
was their first day, I believe. The princesses.
it. Yeah, I think it was fairly close to. I mean,
Well, it was right. It was when we shot the exterior of
That's
the
what I
phone
thought.
booth, landing on the lawn. It was the same
right.
house.
Yeah, it was pretty early on in the shoot, but not that early because we had George, and we didn't have George early in the shoot. So
how many days did George work roughly? He's not in it
that many.
much.
Like 5.
yeah.
Did you ever kind of get a kind of relationship?
Oh
with
yeah,
him?
we hung out. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what movie sets are like. You don't do anything.
And George is really was
Stand
just
around
the
all day.
easiest guy to sit down and chat with.
Fans of yours.
Yeah, no, we spent plenty of time hanging out with George. It was, and even with as little as he did on Bogus, we spent a lot of time hanging out with him. And
No way.
it was really funny because Keanu and I, so we saw him over the years quite a bit, and then we saw him. We were both having dinner together at a restaurant in Santa Monica, and we saw George there, and he died really soon after that. I remember telling Kelly, his daughter, about this, and I saw her a couple weeks ago. Just really weird, fortuitous moment where we all kind of reconverged, and then he was gone. And
If you guys were separated, it would have been
you know,
disastrous.
it was
for
really,
writers.
really tragic that he died.
Eventually,
But
your music will
I was
help
glad to
put an
be
end to
able to
war
see
and
him
poverty.
again.
It will align the planets.
I was lucky enough to. My parents took me to go see him in concert in
It was
Vegas.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
amazing. One of the truly greats, and just such a gentle, brilliant soul.
Excellent for dance.
And all his material's still relevant today.
Oh, completely.
Have the
Yeah,
ladies sign
completely.
as well, would you
If
please?
not more so.
After all,
Yeah.
they are in the band.
They are?
I mean, it was rough for him. When I saw him at the end, just the way the country was going. I mean, he was pretty aggravated with the way things were going politically. And
Yeah.
he was not a happy camper.
I'd love to hear his take on today.
Yeah, his material was getting pretty intense by the end. I mean, he was really not having it, and saw the way the country was going, and was really not
That's to help
at
you
ease about
start
it
your
at all.
Thanks.
But a gentle human being, considering how barbed his wit
If
was.
I might
He
be
was
so honored.
an incredibly gentle-hearted
you?
person.
Do you know how to play, Rufus?
So while you guys were shooting this, there was talk of what if
This
a
is
sequel,
Steve
right?
Vai, right? Did Steve Vai do the first one as well as the second one?
No.
He did not. Okay, he's just did Vogus. Okay. Who did? Oh, was it Stevie Salas?
Might have been.
Yeah, who did the first one? The guitar playing? It's obviously not George playing guitar. It may be Steve Salas doing that. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was asking about when you guys started talking about the potential of a sequel. Was there talk during filming of this, like what if we did another one, or
No, absolutely not from my end.
no?
No, because it was once we finished shooting this,
My friend, this has been
Alex and Keanu went on. Were extremely busy. I just was pushing this rock up the hill because it looked bad right away for DEG, and like we weren't going to get it released. And we thought it really, that's kind of what really makes that George last take the piss out of it is pretty great.
But no, I mean, honestly, Keanu and I, we loved the movie. We loved making it. We loved everybody. And we thought it was never, ever going to be seen by anyone ever.
Yeah, because it really got bad fast.
Yeah. And we honestly had written it off. And I'd gone off into other stuff. I got my MTV show going. And he went off to do other stuff. And we just wrote it off. We were really good friends by that point, and we stayed good friends. But neither of us thought this film was ever going to see the light of day, much less there would ever be a sequel.
And it took so long because of that protracted process of bankruptcy, and then the DG guys had choices, so we made a pitch for them to release it, and we argued. My colleagues at Interscope, Ted Field and Robert Corr, both argued vigorously, like, let's test this, and they just really didn't believe in it.
So with you guys thinking that this may never see the light of day, how incredibly shocked were you that this became such a massive hit and, such a piece of pop culture history, that today we're still talking about it?
I mean, we were completely unprepared for the hit that it became, and even when it came out, I was surprised that it did it as well as it did. I remember I was down in Austin shooting a music video, directing a music video, and it came out and did huge numbers. And my manager called me and told me to pick up a copy of Variety, and it was like a picture of me and Keanu sitting on piles of cash. Was the centerfold? Do you remember that ad?
I do.
And I was like, "What on God's earth?" And it just was not. I was not expecting that. But we were both really happy. That's why we did the animated show after, and we voiced a season of that. I mean, we were really proud of it, and we really it was a really big moment of both of our youth. But we did not expect it to I don't think anyone in our camp, me, Keanu, Scott, Chris, Ed, anybody expected the films to last 20 years later, 25 years later. The amount of like not just grown-ups who experienced it as kids, but the amount of kids that come up to me every day who are seeing it fresh or just as kids is constant. And that's a complete jaw dropper. I don't have any idea even why that is, but it's nice, it's sweet.
I think that a lot of it has to do with it was really a word of mouth movie. When we first tested it, it instantly played really well. And then when you'd listen to a focus group afterwards, people were just buzzing, quoting lines. And there was something about it that it wasn't like all the other teenage movies,
right,
although it is often compared to Fast Times.
Yeah, but there's no drugs in
Wayne's
this. There's no
World.
sex in this.
It's not raunchy.
There's
Yeah.
nothing
It's not
raunchy, about
raunchy,
it.
and there's not a kind of satiric edge to it like some of those movies have, which are fine. This just is kind of a straight two clowns in a much more innocent, kind of widely, like everyone can kind of see this. An 8-year-old loves this movie, and a lot of adults who would have thought this to be a stupid movie, a teenage movie not for them, kind of just can't help but laugh as they're sitting there watching it. I think that it was a big DVD movie, or
Right.
sorry,
And
VHS
cable.
movie.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was fun.
Okay.
Hadn't seen that in a while.
Yeah.
We'll continue with part 2.
Party on.